Welcome back to TJ Walker Interactive. I'm Mike Bako. We're now in our question and answer period where we'll be taking questions from the interactive chat box here, but also your questions from YouTube and tjwalker.com in the blog section. TJ, let's go right to answers.com. Sherry, who works with media training for a company, wants to know, what's the difference between proactive image building versus crisis communication? What actually works?
Well, those are not mutually exclusive. Good crisis communications, you should be proactive. A lot of times when I'm called around the world to train executives, let's say at an oil refinery, it's not because there's a fire going on at that moment. It's because we're being proactive, planning on how they will deal with a media crisis before it happens. So good crisis communication is always proactive. Now, there is a difference between, okay, you have a book launch in 3 weeks, you're going to be able to sit down, really plan your messages, your sound bites, practice, rehearse, versus it's 3 in the morning, you get a phone call and there's an explosion and your oil tanker is going down and there's fire. You can't necessarily treat both media opportunities the same. But here is what is similar, that you have to narrow your message down to the top 3, have some sound bites ready. In the case of the oil tanker going down to 3, you've got to be able to communicate with the media quickly, preferably in the next 20 minutes. But you don't necessarily have lots of time to rehearse that specific one. But good crisis communications, you should have prepared accidents that are similar to that months before, even years before, so you are ready. So you need both. Thanks for writing. Mike, who do we have who's written into tjwalker.com and also the TJ Walker channel on YouTube?
TJ will actually turn to Jennifer now. She has comments from the YouTube channel. Jennifer?
Yes, I have Emil saying, great tips and thank you for all your help. So for us who have some difficulties to talk and present the ideas in front of a lot of people, what types of visual aids are suitable?
Well, Emil, let me tease out the question. If you're having difficulty speaking to a lot of people in an audience, that's a separate issue from visual tools. If you're feeling uncomfortable speaking to a lot of people, you need to focus your eye contact on one person at a time. Have a private conversation with just one person at a time for a full thought, and then go to the next person. So whether you're talking to 2 people, 200 or 2,000, you shouldn't be doing anything different. Now, when it comes to visual tools, you need to focus not on yourself, but on your audience. What will help your audience the most? So there, again, it doesn't matter if you're talking to 2 people or 2,000. The difference is if you're talking to 2,000, you might not want to use a prop that people have to feel and see in order for it to work. Now, I've seen speakers use a prop, let's say it's an old-fashioned key or a certain rock. If you pass it around, it's dramatic. But if you're in front of 2,000 people, that won't work well. But some props still do work well in front of large groups. For example, when Steve Jobs was introducing one of the micro-thin laptop computers a few years ago, he didn't just put up a PowerPoint slide that said 1/8 of an inch thick, or that gave specifications. He actually pulled one out of an envelope, said, see, it's as thin as an envelope. So it created a great visual. If you were close enough to the stage to see it, that's great, but for everyone else, they watched it on a huge screen. So the main thing, ask yourself, how will it appear to the person in the audience, even if they're in the back row? You do that, you'll be in good shape. Thanks for the question.
TJ, staying with YouTube, we turn to Nathan Dowie, and he made a comment, or she, I'm sorry, for your worst victory speech of the election of 2010, John Boehner, who famously cried during his speech. Comment from Nathan Dowie, when Marco Rubio cried during his victory, he had reason to. He came from an impoverished family and rose to power on the Republican ticket, so in a sense he fulfilled his dream. When John Boehner cries, I immediately think he's faking it. So TJ, when a politician cries, when a celebrity cries, it's usually in relation to something emotional happening or begging for forgiveness. I'm sure we'll see Charlie Sheen probably make one of these emotional pleas in an interview coming up. But what do you think about when someone cries during a speech, during an interview?
The rules have changed over this. In 1972, Ed Muskie was accused of crying during the New Hampshire primary. He claims, until his death, that I believe he's died. Forgive me if he is still with us. He claimed to his death that it was a snowflake on his cheek. He didn't actually cry. But it was considered such a controversy that it hurt his image of a tough guy. Now, things changed. By the time Ronald Reagan came around in 1980, he had mastered the art of almost crying, sort of eyes getting misty, pausing, and then continuing to go. Bill Clinton did the same thing. The slight cry, the slight welling up of emotions. John Boehner's different, though. I mean, he's practically blubbering for what seems like 5 minutes. Now, in his victory speech, it was maybe 30 seconds, but to me, it just seemed way too long and not that appropriate. It wasn't like he was digging ditches 2 weeks ago. I mean, this is a career politician who's been in office for 20 years, very successful